Well, we're going to do stems just a little bit differently than we've done them in other DVDs. And the reason for that is this is a kayak, which has much narrower entries and exits typically. And so that means that when you combine the inner stem and the outer stem, we need about 1.25 inches, right? So in previous DVDs, we've showed you how to basically to steam and laminate everything you need all at once, and then how to glue them all together all at once. Well, I think that some people are going to have a hard time. When we did that, it was 4 1/4-inch pieces of wood. When you start to get into 5, gluing that gets a little bit tricky. So there's really no reason for it. So I'm going to step back. We kind of redid how we do that with these plans. So you're going to notice on your stem plans, it's just like the other plans where you glue them. The difference is this is going to go to a 3/4 piece of plywood to accommodate the actual stem pieces. And you're going to notice on your plans that there's a line here that says cut to dotted line to allow for the 3/4-inch stem. Okay, so what that means is from this dotted line to the solid line is your inner stem, and your outer stem will be above that. All right, so in order to illustrate this, we've cut 2 of the same forms, and we're going to show you each step of the process. This one is ready to glue the outer stem, and we've already steam bent these some time ago, and I'm going to show you how we glue that. This one over here has been cut for the inner stem, so let's take a look. Okay, so this form was cut to do the inner stem, right? So it's a little bit backwards. You're going to do the outer stem, and then you're going to go ahead and do the inner stem. And the good news is when you cut this to steam bend it to glue up your inner stem, that's the exact same shape that it needs to be for when you put it on the mold so that you're going to build your boat, all right? The end goal here, and this is an outer stem, is to get it glued together so that we can use that on the boat, right? So I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to show you the steam box, and then we'll just walk through this step by step, all right? Now, when we first did this about 15 years ago for the first DVD, we used a tea kettle, an electric tea kettle, and some pipe and some rags, and it works great. And frankly, we're probably responsible for the sales of more electric tea kettles than anybody else in history. But tea kettles, particularly electric ones, are getting to be more difficult to come by and very expensive. At least that's what we're hearing. And here in the shop, we use a steamer, typically bigger than this, but this is all you need to do the project that you're going to do. And this will do canoes, this will do small boats, this will do kayaks easily. So let me show you basically how we built this. For the generation of steam, this is a $60 steam generator that they use for peeling wallpaper. Right, so if you go to any of the big-box stores, any wallpaper shop, anything like that, it plugs in, you get 45 minutes of steam, which is more than enough for what we're going to do, right? So all we do is we cut the end off, we put a little hole in the bottom here, wrap some tape, and let it drop down. It works fine. And we actually have a PVC fitting underneath here, which helps it too. The box is just a simple little box. Now, you don't want to use regular wood like pine or anything like that, because when it starts to get steamy, it will expand and do some really crazy stuff on you. So use plywood. This particular box is only about 3 inches deep, and it's about 7 inches wide, okay? And it's got a piano hinge on the back. You don't need to use a piano hinge, but it's got a hinge on the back, hasps on the front to keep it down, okay? Now, there is a lot of pressure building up in there, and it does get hot. So, if you look closely along the sides here, you'll see that we've drilled and we put dowels, just little 1/4-inch dowels all the way through. And what that does is it stands the pieces up about halfway in the box. So we've got steam going in, we got the pieces suspended about halfway up. With ash, which is what we use, you need about 15 minutes to make that soft and pliable enough under full steam in order to bend it around these forms, right? So as long as there's no knots and, you know, it's a decent grain piece of wood, you're not going to have any problems. You're going to see we're going to bend it around there in a second, and it's a piece of cake. All right, so this is it. This is the only thing you need for steam. It should be less than $100 for the whole thing. So let's take a look inside, because I'm going to get ready to grab these pieces of wood. Gloves, steam is hot, so make sure you got gloves on. Now when I pull this out of here, the first 30 seconds are really, really important. So I'll put them together and I'll kind of pre-bend them based on what the form is. And as I walk it over there, I'll already have bent them, and I'll put them on the form. All right, let's take a look. So you can see there's a whole lot of steam going on there. I've got the pipe coming out here. Everything looks great. It's all going to bend real easy. So I'm going to take these out of here and bring them over there right now. All right. All right, so it's important to get the bend done first. Don't worry too much about up here, because that'll be easy to take care of. So start by taking care of the pivot point here. Putting it down. Okay, and then you're going to bend it around and get one down here a little bit lower. And once you've got it that far, now it's just a matter of filling in the gaps. And if you have to, you need to walk basically from clamp to clamp to clamp to make sure that there are no gaps in between. So again, you want to really take care of the bend as much as possible before anything cools down on you. There you go, simple as can be. Again, you're going to hear me say this a number of times. I've done a ton of stems, and it's not too bad for me, but you may want to have another pair of hands handy that are cranking on those clamps while you're pushing it down around the form, and it'll make it much simpler for you. All right, the only thing that I should have told you about these two forms that we're doing here is there is a dotted line here that we're about to do on a glue up over there. But make sure these holes that you drill down here, these holes, nothing special. This is just about 1.5 inch bit that I use to bore it out. But make sure that these holes are, about 1/2 inch at least beneath this dotted line when you're drilling the other one, because you're going to end up cutting that other one down to the dotted line, and the last thing in the world you want is your hole somewhere in the middle of the dotted line, because that'll cause you all kinds of problems when you get to this stage here. All right, so we're doing a little bit backwards, but I hope you're getting the gist here. This one was 3 high, 3/4 inches, which is why the dotted line is 3/4 inches away from the solid line. Because when you put this back on, when you put this on the jig for the boat, you're going to find it lines up perfectly with the other forms, just the way it is. All right, now the outer stem is going to be too thick, and that goes on the boat after you finish stripping everything. And so we're going to glue both of them up separately. Now, why do I have 2 sets of lines? Because believe it or not, the curve is different. If I took these off and just did 2 beneath it, the curve wouldn't be the same as if having 3 and then 2 on top of that, and it actually makes a pretty big difference for the end product of your boat. Okay, so this is doing its thing. It needs at least a day for that wood to dry out in a decent environment, right? So you want to get all that moisture out of there before you start gluing up. So I'm going to take it off here. I'm going to put it in a safe place, but I'm going to grab the other one and I'm going to show you that once all this is done, how to take your bent and turn that into an actual stem that you can use, all right? So let me put this in a safe place. Now it's time to glue some up. Now what you really need to make sure that you remember is that you put some painter's tape all the way down here, right? Or cellophane tape, anything that you are absolutely sure that you can peel off, right? And if you don't, there's a real good chance you'll be gluing this right to the form, which is the worst possible thing. Now you may be able to see I put a couple of tick marks here so that when I steamed them, before I took them off, I put a tick mark so that I knew where the end of the form was, so that I know now when I put it back on, it's going to bend back to where it wants to be. When you do take it off, obviously there's going to be some spring back. It's really not a big deal, because once I glue these together with epoxy, there will be no more spring back. It'll absolutely be what it's supposed to be. Okay, so this is a pretty simple process. I've got some slightly thickened epoxy here. You can see it is pretty runny. And we're using wood flour, and again, if you get a kit, all this is in there. And you're going to fairly liberally, but don't get crazy, about spreading it on there, else you end up with a big gooey mess when you clamp them together. And just go ahead and coat the side. That is up. Obviously you don't do the side that's facing down towards the form. Alright, and because we never just glue one surface when we're doing epoxy, now we got to paint the inside of this other piece. Once you've painted both sides, just put them back together and line up those little tick marks right to the end of the form there. Now we're going to get one clamp on there just to hold her in place. Okay, now we've said this before, I'll say it again. Epoxy is not like yellow glue. You're not supposed to squeeze everything out of there. Just a nice, firm holding. As you're going down, you should have gloves on your hand, because what you're going to do is make sure that it's even side to side. And just walk your clamps right around the corner. Make sure that you don't have any gaps there. There you go. All right, you'll hear me say this over and over and over again during this DVD. It is always easier to clean up than it is to sand epoxy. So before you walk away, just take your gloved hand, go down and get all that excess off of there. And that's a good chance to check and make sure you didn't mess up and that it's nice and even, the two pieces all the way down, so that when you do sand it, you don't lose a lot of width while you're doing that. Again, you want this to be 3/4 inches of an inch wide. And it looks good. Okay, so what did I gyp you out of by not showing you the entire process? Nothing, really. The only difference is if you were doing the inner stem gluing up, you would have put some epoxy on here, epoxy on the inside of the next piece, and then done the exact same thing that I just showed you so that it would be 3 thick instead of 2 thick. Other than that, they're absolutely identical, but one is obviously down lower than the other, so it changes the curve. All right, so this is 1/4 inch ash. There's a 1/4 inch cutout here to do your inner stems, which means when you put it on the boat, it's going to be absolutely perfect. And if any of this is confusing to you, in the next few minutes, it won't be, because you're going to see us actually put it on the boat. All right, good. On to the next.